William Perky in 1992 found and described four different patterns that teachers follow, typically when introducing a lesson or when teaching. These include being intentionally disinviting, unintentionally inviting, and intentionally inviting. Although it seems like they all have a lot of similarities, really it's all about the intention that the teacher had, followed by how the kids are taking it. So if the teacher had an intention with the way that they were speaking, that first word would be intentionally. Sometimes it's unintentionally. This kind of happens haphazardly. The second word kind of describes how the student is taking it or interacting with the lesson. It could be disinviting, something that they're not going to want to do or have a negative experience with, or inviting, something that they're going to be willing to put the work in for. Here I've created a quadrant of intentionality and nature of invitation. For each quadrant that I'll go through, I found an image of a teacher who kind of is displaying the physical signs and body language of what I would imagine this type of teacher would be like. Now, it's not always consistent. I just did it for kind of a visual of it. For the intentionally disinviting teacher, I hope and we all hope that this is the least common type of teacher. This is someone who is very negative, pessimistic, can even cross the line of talking down to students, is very about being in control in their classroom. So they might, students are walking into their classroom for a lesson about summarizing, let's say, and they would say, all right, let's sit down and get to it. Today we're going to talk about summarizing, but I know I'm going to end up having to repeat myself and teach us in small groups because y'all don't get anything. So let's just sit down and get to it. Put your pencils up. Let's just kind of go. So they're going to speak very pessimistically. They're going to be snappy. They're not going to make the lessons seem inviting. They're not going to seem like they care about the kids either. The next slide is going to be about kind of a student's reaction to having this kind of teacher. When students have teachers like this, what's probably going on in their mind at the beginning of each lesson and almost every day is no matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough. When is this lesson going to be over? I want to be out of here. And they're going to be very disengaged. So even though they might know that, okay, today we're learning about summarizing, it's all about the tone of it. It's about the disposition of the teacher that made it seem like no matter what a student does, it's not going to be good enough. This is going to be difficult. And if they do find it difficult, the teacher's not going to be willing to help them. They're automatically going to go into this fixed mindset of, I can't do it. If a teacher is this intentionally disinviting, I sincerely hope that his or her colleagues have kind of stepped in. First, checking in, hey, is everything okay with the teacher? What's going on that might be causing this level of stress or this level of burnout? From there, probably going into some sort of professional development as far as the impact of a growth mindset or restoration practices with students who are really struggling with behavior. Because when you have a teacher like this, inevitably, the behavior is going to get worse. So I think if a teacher really is this much, there's no one piece of advice that I can give. This would be more something that people who are close to them should have a meeting, really talk to them about the way that they're speaking to students. Hopefully come at it from, checking in with the teacher first, but setting that, hey, it's not okay to be this intentionally disinviting. Maybe finding some research about what that could do versus finding research about what a positive classroom environment could do. So that's kind of what I would tell them here. Although they have the intention of telling the kids what they're going to learn about, they also have the intention of being a very strict kind of authority figure. So this kind of teacher, I think, is outside of one golden nugget of advice that could really help them move forward. The unintentionally disinviting teacher is one that I think, unfortunately, a lot of us slip into sometimes without realizing it. The body language that I chose here is they're serious, they're down to business, They aren't necessarily like smiling and happy, but they're not as intense as the intentionally disinviting teacher. This is one that I think we could give advice to. So, unintentionally disinviting with summarizing. It could start a lesson, hey guys, welcome in. We're going to do summarizing again because many of us really had a hard time with that on the test. I know a lot of us got like 0 out of 10 on that summary. So we're just going to have to keep practicing it and doing it until we get it right. Let's take out our notebooks and we're going to take notes. This is a pretty hard passage to find a summary for, but we got to do it so you can master it. So the whole tone is almost hopeless, but they're not meaning to. They're meaning to say, hey, we need to work on this skill. But the way that they're presenting it is checking students out. So let's see how a student would react to this. A student with an unintentionally disinviting teacher might be thinking, oh man, here we go again. I've never gotten it before, so I won't get it now. Maybe I'll doodle instead. They're pretty much asking for disengagement because here, even though the teacher's not meaning to, it creates a sense of hopelessness in the students. A teacher like this, I think would be approachable because they don't have the intention of being disinviting. They may not realize it. And so this would be something where maybe someone who's close to the teacher or through professional development is going to talk about how using praise first is going to help students. So even if the students didn't do that great on summarizing on the test, the teacher could start with, hey, you guys did really well finding the evidence to prove the main ideas. We did struggle a little bit with putting that in the correct order in a summary, so that's going to be what we're kind of reviewing and going over today. And I know you guys can do it because you already found the quotes, which is really half the battle. So it's approaching it a little bit more positively and having that teacher realize the one small step is start with positivity. If you're having a lesson target and it is a difficult thing, don't come right out and say that. Praise them, tell them that they can do it, and that's going to help you become intentionally inviting. So for this teacher, I would focus on the positivity. Maybe one little thing is starting by praising your students at the beginning of each lesson is kind of my little nugget of advice for this kind of teacher. The unintentionally inviting teacher. I think a lot of us as teachers kind of started off like this. This is where we may have, in student teaching and when we were dreaming about teachers, this is the kind of free will. I'm going to hype the students up. They're going to feel so good about themselves. We're going to do great. You guys are so smart. And none of these are bad things. But when it comes to the learning targets, the kids might still be left wondering kind of, okay, what am I learning here? This one, I think the teacher has good intention. They're just not pointing that intention towards the learning targets or towards engaging students. It's more so based on the relationships. And these are all amazing things. So versus, based on the other two versus this one, I think unintentionally inviting is better than the last two just because the students want to be there. They're going to be happier. But it is going to be kind of the teacher who's like, oh, I don't really know where our lesson is going to take us, but we're going to work on this and you guys are going to do awesome. And so it fosters that positivity and courage and confidence in the students, but they may not know where to go with their learning. So this is what a student might think if they have a teacher like this. I misspoke earlier. A student with a teacher like this is probably thinking, I'm so happy to be here. I have no idea what we're learning or doing, but I feel good. So this is the type that if an admin was to walk into the room, and we've all had this situation, and they were to say, what are you learning today? Kids would be like, I don't know. But they're hopping around and they're discussing and things look good, but when you get down to it, the learning targets themselves are kind of lost. So a teacher like this, I would, just like the advice I gave earlier, I would start with the praise. Oh my gosh, your kids love to be in here. You have great relationships with them. They want to do their best for you. You're doing all the right things. One way to just add a little bit more intentionality with the learning targets and with the lessons is being able to clearly state it and visualize it for students. So keep going with the praise, keep going with the relationships. But why don't we kind of start to either formalize or have more of a goal in mind when creating our lesson plans, and that should be clearly introduced. So for a teacher like this who's so focused on the relationships, it could be something as simple as giving them the task each day before they leave work to write the learning targets on the board for the next day. So it's something that's visual, it's something that's there, it's something that might help ground them and remind even the teachers themselves of their purpose. In turn, that's going to help the students be able to see what the lesson is about, and they're going to be able to couple that confidence that the teacher gave them with, oh, okay, I'm confident, I feel good, my teacher loves me, she's going to care for me while I'm doing this specific task. And so that just adds a little bit extra. So one thing I would tell this teacher is write the learning target on the board, give yourself 5 minutes every day to go over it. And it's going to feel awkward at first, and your kids are going to be like, what happened here? But eventually it will create much more intentionally inviting lessons. And finally, the teacher that we all hope to be, the intentionally inviting teacher. I think teachers as a whole have a great time doing this when there's an admin in the room, and then sometimes we forget when there isn't. This is the teacher who has a smile, has a positive disposition, is praising their students, and they're also laying out what needs to be done, but they're not approaching it in a scary way. So they're going to start with praise, something about the lesson before or the day before, even social emotional things that you've learned, something positive. Then going into the learning target, kind of almost with neutrality. Here's what it is. And being clear and transparent is going to help the students feel like they know what to learn. And that in turn is going to give them confidence. So it's not so much going to the negative or the positive. It's just, hey guys, thank you so much yesterday for staying on task with that assignment. I really loved that during our group discussions, we all waited for each other to talk rather than interrupting. That was so amazing. Today we're going to be learning to summarize. And as we're summarizing, we're really going to be focusing on using at least two main ideas and one quote for each main idea, following this format. So it's going to be structured. They're going to know exactly what to say, but the tone and the body language and everything is saying, you can do this. It is achievable to you, and the students would be able to answer, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. That's going to make them really feel invited in the lesson. A student with this kind of teacher is going to be thinking, I can do this. And even if they have the thought of, I can't do this, it might be followed with, I can't do this, but I can ask my teacher for help. So it's going to be really showing students who are engaged, who feel safe to share, who feel safe to make mistakes, but know exactly what they're meant to be doing. So this intentionally inviting kind of quadrant is where teachers really need to be on. My hope is that if teachers have really mastered this intentionally inviting idea, that they become kind of the teacher leaders to help the teachers in the other quadrants out. Maybe by modeling the beginning of a lesson, maybe leading professional development on it, opening those hard conversations with other teachers, but also getting ideas from them, being vulnerable to create kind of a trust. So my hope is that the intentionally inviting teachers become the leaders themselves so that we can see more people landing in this quadrant.